Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Operator. Staff Sergeant Cody Strong adjusted his scope, the crosshairs dancing over the compound 3 miles away in the Afghan mountains. 20 years of military service had carved deep lines around his steel-gray eyes, and his weathered hands moved with the precision of a surgeon. At 42, Cody was what his colleagues called a ghost, a special operations sniper who could disappear into any landscape and eliminate targets that others couldn't even find. Target acquired, he whispered into his comm, watching a high-value Taliban commander emerge from the building. Painting the target now. The laser designator hummed softly as Cody marked the building for the incoming drone strike. In 30 seconds, a Hellfire missile would reduce the compound to rubble. It was just another Tuesday in his world of calculated violence and surgical precision. Cody had joined the Army straight out of high school in small-town Montana, driven by a combination of patriotism and a desperate need to escape his alcoholic father's fists. The military had given him purpose, structure, and most importantly, the skills to become one of the most feared operators in Special Forces. He'd serve in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and half a dozen Black Ops missions that officially never happened. His reputation was built on two things: his supernatural accuracy with a rifle and his absolute unwillingness to forgive betrayal. When a teammate had once leaked their position to insurgents for money, Cody had personally hunted the man down during leave and left him paralyzed in a Detroit alley. The incident was never reported, never investigated. Some betrayals, Cody believed, deserved permanent consequences. 3 years ago, he'd married Roseanne Brewer, a nurse he'd met during his recovery from shrapnel wounds. She was beautiful, compassionate, and claimed to understand the demands of military life. More importantly, she'd accepted his 8-year-old son Dino from his first marriage, a marriage that had ended when his ex-wife died in a car accident. Roseanne had brought her own baggage, a 6-year-old daughter named Emma from a previous relationship. Cody had embraced the role of stepfather, thinking he was building the family he'd never had growing up. For 3 years, their home in Fayetteville had been his sanctuary between deployments. Missile impact in 10 seconds, came the voice through his earpiece. Cody watched through his scope as the building disappeared in a ball of orange flame. Another successful mission. In 48 hours, he'd be rotating home for a month of leave. Time he planned to spend teaching Dino to hunt and maybe taking Roseanne on that delayed honeymoon to the mountains. The satellite phone in his pack buzzed. Strange. Only family emergencies came through that line during active operations. Strong here, he answered, expecting to hear his commanding officer's voice. Instead, a woman's voice crackled through the static. Sergeant Strong? This is Linda Hawkins from North Carolina Child Protective Services. Sir, your son Dino is in our care. Cody's blood turned to ice. Through the scope, he could see secondary explosions from the destroyed compound, but suddenly the war seemed very far away. What happened? His voice remained steady, but his finger had unconsciously moved to his rifle's trigger. Sir, his stepfather used a cigarette lighter on him. He's severely injured and being treated at Cape Fear Valley Medical Center. The burns are extensive. The world tilted. Stepfather? Cody was Dino's father. The only stepfather in the picture was... In the background of the call, he heard a child's sobbing voice. His son's voice, broken and terrified. He burned his initials into my arm. He said I was his property now. The words hit Cody like a sniper's bullet to the chest. His son, his boy who collected baseball cards and dreamed of becoming a Marine like his dad, had been branded like cattle by some piece of shit who was apparently living in his house. Who did this? Cody's voice dropped to a whisper that his unit knew meant someone was about to die. A man named Quentin Krause. He's been arrested, but... Cody ended the call. His commanding officer, Major Cornelius Clayton, materialized beside him with that uncanny ability that made him an excellent field commander. We'll finish this mission, Strong. Go home and teach that fool a lesson he'll never forget. Clayton had served with Cody for 8 years. He'd seen what happened to people who crossed his best sniper. The major's cold smile suggested he wouldn't be filing any reports about what might happen to Mr. Quentin Krause. As Cody packed his gear with mechanical precision, his mind was already shifting into hunter mode. Someone had hurt his son and was apparently sleeping in his bed with his wife. The war in Afghanistan was about to become secondary to a much more personal conflict. He'd built his reputation on never forgetting and never forgiving betrayal. Now he was about to remind everyone why that reputation was well-earned. Chapter 2. The Betrayal Revealed. 18 hours later, Cody's boots hit the tarmac at Pope Army Airfield. He'd caught the first military transport out of Bagram, sleeping fitfully during the long flight while images of his son's terrified voice played on repeat in his mind. The October air in North Carolina felt alien after months in the desert, but what truly disoriented him was the civilian clothes in his duffel bag, clothes he'd need to blend in while he gathered intelligence on exactly what had happened to his family. Cape Fear Valley Medical Center loomed before him like a fortress. Cody had infiltrated terrorist compounds with less anxiety than he felt walking through those sterile hallways. A friendly nurse directed him to the pediatric burn unit, where he found his son sleeping in a bed that made the tough 8-year-old look impossibly small. Dino's left arm was wrapped in bandages, but Cody could see the edges of burned flesh where someone had deliberately pressed hot metal against his child's skin. The letters QK were branded into the boy's forearm like a rancher's mark on livestock. "Daddy." Dino's eyes fluttered open, and Cody saw a wariness there that hadn't existed before. The look of prey that had learned predators could strike without warning. "I'm here, buddy." Cody sat carefully on the edge of the bed, his voice gentle despite the volcanic rage building behind his ribs. "Tell me what happened." The story came out in halting whispers. 3 months ago, Mom had started bringing Uncle Quinn around more often. Quinn Krause was a construction foreman, big and loud, who'd moved into their house 2 weeks ago. He'd started hitting Mom when she talked back, then graduated to backhanding Dino when the boy tried to protect her. "He said you weren't coming back," Dino whispered. "He said he was my dad now, and I had to do what he said. When I told him you were my real dad, he got really mad. He heated up his lighter with the stove, and Cody gently squeezed his son's uninjured hand. "Where's Emma?" "She's with Grandma Brewer. Quinn never hurt her, just me and Mom." Dino's eyes filled with tears. "Is Mom okay?" She tried to stop him, but he hit her really hard. 20 minutes later, Cody sat in his truck outside the hospital, staring at his phone. 3 missed calls from Roseanne, 2 voicemails he hadn't listened to yet. His hands, steady enough to make 1,000-yard shots in combat, trembled slightly as he played the first message. "Cody, baby, I know how this looks, but I can explain everything. Quinn was just helping around the house while you were gone, and things got complicated. I never meant for any of this to happen. Please call me back." The second voicemail was different, desperate, pleading. "The police released Quinn on bail. He's talking about leaving town, but he wants to see me first. I'm scared, Cody. I know I messed up, but I need you. We need you." Cody deleted both messages without a trace of emotion. His wife, his partner, the woman he'd trusted with his son's safety, had brought a predator into their home. Worse, she was still in contact with the man who'd branded his child like property. The drive to his house took 15 minutes through neighborhoods that had once felt like home. Now every familiar street corner looked like a potential ambush site. Every parked car a possible threat. His house, a modest 2-story colonial with a lawn he'd spent weekends manicuring, sat at the end of Magnolia Drive like a crime scene waiting to be processed. Cody sat in his truck, studying the house through a sniper's eyes. Roseanne's Honda was in the driveway, but there was also a lifted red Ford F-250 with construction company logos and a thin blue line bumper sticker. Quinn was still here, moving with the silent precision that had kept him alive through hundreds of combat missions. Cody approached the house from the side yard. Through the kitchen window, he could see them, his wife and the man who'd tortured his son, sitting at the dinner table like a normal couple. Roseanne looked smaller than he remembered, her auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail that showed fresh bruises on her neck. She was crying, gesturing frantically while speaking in hushed tones. Quentin Krause was everything Cody had expected, A thick-necked bully with prison tattoos covering his forearms and dead eyes that suggested violence was his first language. "Told you the little shit would cause problems," Quinn was saying, his voice carrying through the thin window. "Should have just sent him to foster care when this started. He's just a boy, Quinn. He didn't deserve." The sound of Quinn's palm striking Roseanne's cheek was sharp as a gunshot. "Don't tell me what he deserved. I'm trying to make a family here, and that kid was disrespecting me in my own house." Cody's vision went red around the edges. His own house. The man was calling it his own house. "The soldier boy ain't coming back," Quinn continued, reaching across the table to grab Roseanne's wrist. "His kid understands who's in charge now. Question is, do you?" Cody had heard enough. He'd conducted surveillance on terror cells with less emotional control than he was maintaining now. Every instinct screamed for immediate action, to kick down the door and demonstrate exactly what 20 years of special operations training could do to a civilian wife-beater. But Cody was a professional. He'd learned patience hunting men across 3 continents. This required planning, preparation, and most importantly, ensuring that when justice came, it would be permanent and untraceable. As he slipped back to his truck, one thought crystallized with the clarity of a perfect headshot. Quentin Krause had branded his son and was apparently planning to disappear with his wife. Neither of those things was going to happen. The war had followed him home, but this time, the enemy had made the fatal mistake of bringing it to his family first. Chapter 3. The Hunter's Preparation. Cody checked into a motel 20 minutes from his house, paying cash and registering under a false name he'd used in Syria. The room was Spartan, exactly how he preferred his operational base. He spread his son's medical records, police reports, and printed screenshots from Quinn's social media across the small table, studying his enemy with the same intensity he'd once reserved for high-value targets. Quentin Krause, age 35, had a history that painted him as exactly the kind of predator who hunted vulnerable women. 2 prior domestic violence arrests. Both charges dropped when the victims mysteriously changed their testimony. A dishonorable discharge from the Marines after 3 years of mediocre service. He'd been working construction in Fayetteville for 8 months, exactly 2 months before he'd started helping around Cody's house. The most interesting detail came from Quinn's Instagram account, which he'd kept active even after his arrest. Posted 6 hours ago. Time to start fresh somewhere new. Some people don't appreciate what they have. The geolocation tag showed he was posting from Cody's kitchen. Cody's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Heard you were back in town. Coffee tomorrow?" R. He studied the message for 30 seconds before responding. "Denny's on Bragg Boulevard. 8 a.m. While most betrayed husbands might have felt pain or confusion, Cody felt only the cold clarity that came with target acquisition. Rosen wasn't his wife anymore. She was a hostile asset who'd allowed enemy infiltration of his home base. The question wasn't whether she deserved forgiveness, but whether she'd be useful for intelligence gathering before final disposition. At midnight, Cody drove past his house again. Quinn's truck was gone, but Roseanne's car remained. Through disciplined observation, he established a pattern. Quinn left around 11 p.m. and returned by 7 a.m., probably staying at another location to avoid violating his bail conditions. Smart enough to avoid the obvious trap, but not smart enough to realize he was already being hunted. Cody spent the pre-dawn hours at a 24-hour gun range outside town, burning through 3 boxes of ammunition to keep his skills sharp. The familiar weight of his customized .308 rifle felt more comforting than any conversation he'd had since returning home. Each shot grouped tighter than a quarter at 100 yards, muscle memory from thousands of hours of practice. The plan forming in his mind was elegant in its simplicity. Quinn wanted to disappear with Roseanne. He'd disappear, all right, just not in the way he was expecting. At 8 a.m., Cody sat in a corner booth at Denny's, positioned to watch all entrances while keeping his back to a wall. Old habits. Roseanne arrived 10 minutes late, looking like she'd slept in her car. The confident nurse he'd married had been replaced by a hollow-eyed woman who jumped at shadows. "Thank God you're here," she whispered, sliding into the booth opposite him. "I was so afraid you wouldn't come." Cody studied her with the detached interest of a professional interrogator. 3 years of marriage had taught him her tells. The way she touched her neck when lying, how her voice pitched higher under stress. Right now, every tell was firing simultaneously. "Where's Quinn?" he asked quietly. He's staying with a friend until things calm down. "Cody, I need you to know that I never wanted any of this to happen. When you deployed, I was so lonely, and he was just helping with repairs around the house. I didn't know he had a temper until it was too late." The story was plausible, delivered with enough tears to convince most men. But Cody had interrogated Taliban commanders who were better liars. "How long?" he asked. "How long what? How long have you been sleeping with him?" Roseanne's face crumpled. 6 months. But it didn't mean anything, Cody. I was scared and alone, and he made me feel protected. 6 months. That minute had started during his previous deployment, long before Quinn had moved into their house. The timeline painted a different picture than her story of innocent repairs that got complicated. "He branded my son," Cody said, his voice perfectly level. Heated up a lighter and burned his initials into Dino's arm. "I tried to stop him. I swear I tried, but he's so much stronger than me." He said Dino needed to learn respect, and when I argued, he hit me too. "Look," she pulled down her collar, showing finger-shaped bruises around her throat. Cody felt nothing looking at the marks. A year ago, they would have triggered his protective instincts. Now, they were just evidence that Quinn preferred hands-on violence, useful intelligence for their inevitable confrontation. "Where's he really staying?" Cody asked. "I don't know. He has a friend named Freeman Mora who works construction with him. Maybe there." Another piece of the puzzle. Cody made a mental note to look up Freeman Mora. "He want me to leave with him," Roseanne continued. "Says we can start over somewhere fresh, maybe Tennessee or Georgia. He's talking about leaving this weekend. And you want to go?" The question hung between them like a loaded weapon. Roseanne's answer would determine whether she was a victim who'd made mistakes or an active collaborator in the destruction of his family. "I don't know what I want anymore," she whispered. "I know I hurt you, and I know I failed Dino. But I'm afraid of what Quinn will do if I try to leave him. He's not stable, Cody. He talks about killing people who cross him." Cody almost smiled at the irony. Quinn Krause had no idea what real killing looked like. "I'm going to fix this," he told her, dropping a 20 on the table. "You're going to go home and act normal. Don't tell Quinn we met. Don't change your routine. Can you do that?" Roseanne nodded eagerly, hope flickering in her eyes. "You're going to save us." Cody stood up, looking down at the woman who'd once been his wife. "I'm going to save my son. What happens to you depends on your choices in the next few days." As he walked away, Cody was already calculating distances, timelines, and disposal methods. Quinn Krause wanted to start fresh somewhere new. He was about to get exactly what he'd asked for. Chapter 4: Intelligence Gathering. By noon, Cody had transformed his motel room into a tactical operations center. A detailed map of Fayetteville covered one wall, marked with Quinn's known locations, his workplace, and the addresses of his known associates. Cody's military-issue laptop hummed quietly as it ran facial recognition software against security camera footage he'd obtained through contacts in base security. Freeman Mora's address had been easy to find through public records. A quick drive past the rundown duplex on the south side of town confirmed Quinn's red F-250 parked in the driveway. Cody noted the lack of security cameras, the isolated location, and the fact that Mora's neighbors were either drug addicts or working multiple jobs. Perfect for an operation requiring discretion. His phone buzzed with a text from Major Clayton. "Package delivered to usual location." No questions asked. The package was waiting in a storage unit Cody maintained off-base, military-grade surveillance equipment, untraceable weapons, and other tools of his trade that weren't exactly standard issue. 20 years of special operations had taught him that sometimes the mission required resources that couldn't be requisitioned through official channels. By 3 p.m., Cody had established observation posts around both Mora's duplex and the construction site where Quinn worked. Digital cameras with telephoto lenses gave him real-time surveillance of his targets, while a frequency scanner monitored local police communications. Quinn's pattern was becoming clear. Work until 5 p.m., stop at Murphy's bar for 3 beers, then to Mora's place until late evening. At 6 p.m., Cody was positioned across the street from Murphy's bar when Quinn emerged, visibly drunk and stumbling toward his truck. Most people would have called the police about the obvious DUI in progress. Cody simply followed at a distance, noting that Quinn drove like the entitled asshole he was, speeding, weaving, running stop signs. Quinn's first stop was unexpected, the elementary school where both Dino and Emma attended classes. He sat in his truck in the parking lot for 20 minutes, engine running, staring at the playground where children played after-school programs. Cody felt his finger tighten on the encrypted radio that could summon Clayton and a full tactical team in under 10 minutes. But Quinn eventually drove away without incident, probably too drunk to realize school was still in session. The stop revealed something important, though. He was thinking about the kids, which meant he might try to grab them before his planned disappearance. That possibility died tonight. Quinn's next stop was more predictable, a liquor store where he bought a bottle of Jack Daniels and a carton of cigarettes. Cody noted the store's security cameras and made a mental note to ensure his face never appeared on them. By 8 p.m., Quinn was back at Moore's duplex, but he wasn't alone. Through his telephoto lens, Cody watched as 3 other men joined Quinn and Freeman in the backyard. The gathering had the feel of a planning session. Quinn gesturing emphatically while the others listened, occasional glances toward a map spread across a picnic table. Cody adjusted his parabolic microphone and caught fragments of conversation. Friday night, clean out the account. Across state lines by Saturday. A robbery. They were planning to rob something Friday night and use the money to fund their fresh start. The question was what they intended to hit, and whether Roseanne was part of the plan or just a convenient hostage. At 10 p.m., the meeting broke up. 2 of the men left in a beat-up Chevy, while the third, a tall, nervous-looking guy with a facial tattoo, remained behind with Quinn and Freeman. Cody photographed all of them, then settled in for a long night of surveillance. Around midnight, his patience was rewarded. Quinn emerged from the duplex, carrying a large duffel bag, which he loaded into his truck. When he drove away, Cody faced a choice: follow Quinn or investigate what he'd left behind. The duplex won. 15 minutes after Quinn left, Cody was inside Freeman Moore's home through a back window that had been left open. 20 years of breaking into terrorist safe houses had taught him how to move through civilian spaces without leaving traces. The place was a shrine to failure. Unpaid bills stacked on a table, empty beer cans covering every surface, and the overwhelming smell of cigarettes and desperation. But it was the bedroom that provided real intelligence. Spread across Freeman's bed were detailed floor plans of the First National Bank on Hay Street, guard schedules, and photographs of the armored car service that made Monday morning pickups. Quinn's crew was planning to hit the bank's weekend deposits before the Monday pickup, potentially hundreds of thousands in cash. More interesting was what Cody found in the closet. Tactical gear that looked suspiciously like surplus military equipment, including body armor and weapons that were definitely not legal for civilian ownership. Someone in Quinn's crew had connections to serious criminal networks. A notebook on the nightstand contained the real prize. RB says she can get us the alarm codes from her hospital shift supervisor. Bank manager's wife works there. RB, Roseanne Brewer. His wife wasn't just a victim who'd made bad choices. She was an active participant in planning the robbery that would fund her new life with Quinn Krause. Cody photographed everything, then slipped back out the window. As he drove back to his motel, he felt the cold satisfaction that came with target confirmation. Both Quinn and Roseanne had just upgraded from personal problems to enemy combatants. The bank robbery was scheduled for Friday night. That gave him 3 days to prepare his own operation. Quinn wanted to disappear with stolen money and a married woman. He was about to get half of what he'd asked for. Chapter 5. The trap is set. Thursday morning brought unseasonably cold weather to Fayetteville, along with news that made Cody's blood run ice cold. The hospital called to inform him that Dino had developed an infection in his burn wounds and would need to stay another week for treatment. Someone had been asking questions about the boy's discharge date. Cody arrived at the hospital to find 2 security guards posted outside his son's room, a precaution he'd arranged through military channels after discovering Quinn's school surveillance. But the guards were new faces, men he didn't recognize. "Where are Roberts and Martinez?" he asked the charge nurse. "They called in sick this morning." These are replacement guards from a private company. The replacement guards had the look of men who'd learned violence in prison rather than military service. When Cody asked to see their credentials, both men tensed in ways that confirmed his suspicions. "You need to leave," the larger guard said, his hand moving towards something concealed under his jacket. "Hospital security only." Cody smiled, the cold expression that had been the last thing many enemies had seen. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." The hallway cleared quickly as Cody demonstrated exactly why Special Forces operators were trained in close-quarters combat. Neither fake guard had time to reach their weapons before finding themselves unconscious on the linoleum floor. The encounter lasted less than 30 seconds and was captured by security cameras that mysteriously malfunctioned immediately afterward. Hospital security arrived to find the two men zip-tied to chairs with identification cards that revealed them as associates of Freeman Mora. Quinn had sent men to grab Dino, probably as leverage for the bank job or insurance for his escape. "We need to move you," Cody told his son, while legitimate guard from the base were summoned. "How do you feel about spending a few days with Uncle Clayton?" Dino, despite everything he'd endured, managed a weak smile. "Does Uncle Clayton still have that cool motorcycle?" Within 2 hours, Dino was safely hidden at Clayton's off-base residence under the protection of 2 Delta Force operators on vacation. Quinn's attempt to grab the boy had failed, but more importantly, it had revealed the timeline for his larger plan. The bank job was happening tonight, not Friday. Cody spent Thursday afternoon conducting final reconnaissance of the First National Bank. The building was a standard commercial structure with predictable security, cameras, motion sensors, and a silent alarm connected directly to Fayetteville PD. The armored car pickup happened Monday mornings at 9 a.m., which meant weekend deposits would be sitting in the main vault for maximum payoff. Quinn's plan was actually well conceived. Hit the bank during the minimal security window between Saturday evening and Monday morning, grab the weekend deposits, and disappear before anyone realized the money was gone. If Roseanne was providing inside information about alarm codes, they might actually pull it off, which was exactly what Cody was counting on. At 6 p.m., he positioned himself in an abandoned building across from the bank with a clear view of all approaches. His gear included night vision, encrypted communications, and enough firepower to stop a small army. More importantly, he had something Quinn's crew lacked: professional training and absolute commitment to his mission. Roseanne's Honda pulled up at 7:30 p.m., confirming her active participation. She sat in the car for 10 minutes, probably gathering courage, before walking to the bank's employee entrance. Her key card still worked. She'd obviously been planning this for weeks. Quinn's truck arrived 15 minutes later, followed by Freeman's Chevy with 2 additional crew members. All 4 men were heavily armed and wearing ski masks that wouldn't fool security cameras for long. They were amateurs playing at being professionals. Cody watched through his scope as Roseanne disabled the alarm system from inside, then opened the rear door for Quinn's team. The robbery was textbook, fast, efficient, and completely predictable. What they didn't expect was the SWAT team that surrounded the building 5 minutes after they entered. Cody had called in an anonymous tip about suspicious activity, timing it perfectly to trap Quinn's crew inside with the stolen money. Through his scope, he watched chaos erupt as heavily armed police surrounded every exit. Quinn appeared at the front window, Roseanne held at gunpoint as he screamed demands that no one could hear clearly. The standoff was exactly what Cody had orchestrated, public, documented, and guaranteed to end with Quinn in federal prison for bank robbery and hostage-taking. But Cody wasn't finished. Using skills learned in urban warfare, he infiltrated the police perimeter through storm drains that connected to the bank's basement. While SWAT negotiators kept Quinn distracted at the front of the building, Cody entered through the foundation access and made his way to the vault level. He found Freeman Mora standing guard over 2 bags of stolen cash, nervous and sweating despite the cool evening air. The man never saw Cody coming. "Freeman," Cody whispered from the shadows. When Freeman spun around, gun raised, Cody was already moving. 20 years of close-quarters combat training compressed into 3 seconds of violence that left Freeman unconscious and zip-tied next to the stolen money. The other 2 crew members met similar fates as Cody methodically worked his way through the building. By the time he reached the main floor, Quinn was alone with Roseanne and completely unaware that his backup had been neutralized. Through the bank's security monitors, Cody could see Quinn pressed against the front windows, using Roseanne as a human shield while SWAT snipers found their angles. The man was trapped, desperate, and about to make the kind of mistake that would justify what came next. Cody keyed his radio to the police frequency and spoke in the calm voice of someone providing tactical intelligence. Subject has female hostage at front window. Recommend maintaining containment while secondary team enters through basement access. What he didn't mention was that the secondary team was already inside and had very different orders than arrest and detention. The trap was set. Now came the justice. Chapter 6. The Reckoning begins. Inside the bank, Quinn Krause was learning the difference between planning a crime and executing one under pressure. SWAT's floodlights turned the front windows into a fishbowl, while their negotiator's voice echoed through a bullhorn with offers that sounded more like threats. This is your last chance, Mr. Krause. Release the hostage and surrender, or we're coming in. Quinn pressed the gun harder against Roseanne's temple, his hand shaking with a combination of adrenaline and alcohol withdrawal. I want a helicopter and safe passage. You got 1 hour or the bitch dies. He'd watched too many movies, made too many assumptions about how hostage negotiations worked. What he hadn't accounted for was that his hostage was the wife of a man who'd spent 20 years killing people who threatened his family. Cody emerged from the shadows behind Quinn like a predator who'd been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. His movement was silent, controlled, and absolutely lethal in its intent. Hello, Quinn. The voice made Quinn spin around, dragging Roseanne with him. He found himself face to face with a man who looked like death personified, calm, focused, and completely unimpressed by the gun pointed in his direction. You're supposed to be in Afghanistan, Quinn stammered. I was painting a target for a drone strike when a call came in, Cody said conversationally. It was a Child Protective Services agent. She told me someone had branded my son like cattle. Quinn's gun wavered between Cody and Roseanne, his tactical position suddenly much more complicated. Outside, SWAT was closing in. Behind him stood a man who'd made a career of killing people in their sleep. Stay back. I'll kill her. Cody tilted his head slightly, considering the threat with professional interest. Will you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you need her alive. Dead hostages don't buy you passage out of federal prison. The psychological pressure was deliberate. Cody had interrogated terrorists who'd cracked under less focused attention. Quinn was just a small-town bully who'd never faced someone who understood violence as a craft rather than an impulse. Besides, Cody continued, taking a step closer, she's not really my wife anymore. Hard to be married to someone who's planning bank robberies with a man who tortured your stepson. Roseanne's eyes widened in shock. Cody, I can explain. You got inside information about the alarm codes from someone at the hospital? Cody interrupted. You provided the timing for when security would be minimal. You've been planning this for weeks, haven't you? The admission was written across her face before she could deny it. Quinn's insurance policy had just become worthless. So here's what's going to happen, Cody said, close enough now that Quinn would have to choose between shooting him or Roseanne, but not both. You're going to put the gun down, and we're going to have a conversation about boundaries. Fuck you. Quinn swung the weapon toward Cody, but his movements were those of an amateur, telegraphed, emotional, and fatally slow. Cody's response was the product of 2 decades of training and combat experience. His hand closed around Quinn's wrist like a steel trap, applying pressure to nerve points that made the man's fingers go numb. The gun clattered to the floor as Quinn screamed in pain. Roseanne tried to run, but Cody's other hand caught her wrist with casual efficiency. She wasn't going anywhere until this conversation was finished. 20 years, Cody said quietly, maintaining his grip on both of them. 20 years I've been killing people who threaten innocent families. You know what the difference is between you and them? Quinn was gasping for air, his wrist bent at an angle that suggested permanent damage was imminent. What? They were fighting for something they believed in. You're just a coward who beats children. The sound of Quinn's wrist breaking was sharp as a gunshot. His scream echoed through the bank, audible even over the police bullhorns outside. Roseanne tried to pull away, but Cody's grip was unbreakable. My son is 8 years old, Cody continued conversationally. He collects baseball cards and wants to be a Marine when he grows up. You burned your initials into his arm and told him he was your property. Quinn was sobbing now, cradling his shattered wrist. I was drunk. I didn't mean. You heated up a lighter with the stove, Cody interrupted. That's premeditation. That's deliberate torture of child. Through the bank's windows, SWAT was preparing for entry. Cody could see laser sights painting the walls, hear the tactical teams coordinating their breach. He had maybe 3 minutes before this became significantly more complicated. Here's what's going to happen to you, Quinn. You go to federal prison for bank robbery. If you're lucky, you'll get protective custody. If you're not, Cody leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. I have friends in every major prison system, men who don't approve of people who hurt children. The implications were clear enough that even Quinn's alcohol-damaged brain could process them. Federal prison was where he was going. What happened to child abusers in federal prison was legendary. But Cody wasn't finished. As for you, he said, turning to Roseanne, you're going to prison too. Conspiracy to commit bank robbery, providing material support to criminal activity. Your daughter Emma is going to grow up knowing her mother chose a child abuser over her family. Roseanne's face crumpled. Please, Cody. I made mistakes, but I love you. We can fix this. No, Cody said simply. We can't. The SWAT breach came precisely when he expected it. Explosive charges on the rear door, followed by tactical teams flowing through the building like water. Cody released both his prisoners and stepped back, hands visible and empty. Federal agent, he called out, displaying credentials that would pass casual inspection. Suspect secured. The team leader, a veteran who recognized professional competence, not an acknowledgement. Casualties, one suspect with a broken wrist. Self-inflicted during attempted assault on a federal officer. Quinn was screaming about his rights and demanding medical attention while Roseanne sobbed uncontrollably. Both were zip-tied and led away as evidence teams cataloged the stolen money and weapons. As far as the official record would show, Quinn Krause had injured himself during the failed bank robbery, and Roseanne Brewer had been an unfortunate hostage who turned out to be a co-conspirator. The mysterious federal agent who'd infiltrated the building during negotiations would vanish into bureaucratic paperwork that led nowhere. But Cody's work wasn't finished. Quinn and Roseanne were going to prison, but justice required something more permanent than the federal correctional system could provide. The real reckoning was just beginning. Chapter 7, Federal Justice. 6 months later, the federal courthouse in Raleigh buzzed with activity as Quinn Krause and Roseanne Brewer faced sentencing for their roles in the first national bank robbery. The local media had covered the case extensively, a domestic violence perpetrator and his lover attempting to fund their escape with stolen money made for compelling headlines. Cody sat in the gallery wearing his dress blues, every ribbon and decoration earned through 2 decades of service. To the casual observer, he was simply a concerned father attending his ex-wife's sentencing. Only a few people in the courtroom knew that he'd orchestrated every element of the case that had brought them here. Quinn, wearing an orange jumpsuit and sporting a permanently twisted left wrist, looked like a broken man. 6 months in federal custody awaiting trial had not been kind to him. Word had spread quickly through the prison population that he was a child abuser, and even in protective custody, accidents happened. His face bore fresh bruises that the guards claimed to know nothing about. Mr. Krause, Judge Mercedes Schwartz said, her voice cutting through the courtroom's murmur, you have pled guilty to armed bank robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, and child abuse. The prosecution has recommended 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. Quinn's court-appointed attorney tried to argue for leniency, citing his client's troubled childhood and substance abuse issues. The judge listened with the patience required by law, but her expression suggested she'd heard it all before. Cody had made sure certain facts reached the prosecution team through unofficial channels. Quinn's previous domestic violence arrests, witness statements from neighbors who'd heard Dino screaming, and medical records that showed the burn pattern was consistent with deliberate torture rather than accidental injury. Mrs. Brewer, the judge continued, turning to Roseanne, your role in this crime is particularly troubling. You provided inside information to plan the robbery, and you did so while failing to protect an 8-year-old child from documented abuse. Roseanne's attorney, a more competent defender than Quinn could afford, had negotiated a plea deal, 15 years in federal prison in exchange for testifying against her co-conspirators. She tried to portray herself as another victim, manipulated by Quinn's violence and threats. The strategy might have worked if not for the evidence Cody had anonymously provided. Bank records showing Roseanne had opened secret accounts to hide money. Hotel receipts proving the affair had started long before Quinn moved into their house. Most damning, recorded phone calls from jail where she discussed escape plans with Quinn. I loved him, Roseanne had sobbed during her testimony. I know it was wrong, but I was afraid of what he'd do if I left him. The prosecution had methodically destroyed that narrative. If she'd been afraid for her safety, why had she provided alarm codes for the bank robbery? If she'd been concerned about the children, why had she never reported the abuse to authorities? Both defendants will serve their sentences in federal facilities, Judge Schwartz announced. Mr. Krause will be transferred to ADX Florence in Colorado. Mrs. Brewer will serve her time at FCI Dublin in California. ADX Florence, Supermax, the facility where they sent terrorists, organized crime leaders, and the most dangerous criminals in federal custody. Quinn would spend 23 hours a day in an 8x12 concrete cell, with 1 hour of exercise in a larger concrete box. No contact with other inmates, no television, no books except religious texts. It was a death sentence that would take 25 years to complete. Roseanne's destination was less severe, but equally permanent. FCI Dublin housed white-collar criminals and non-violent offenders, but word would reach the other inmates about why she was there. Women who'd lost their own children to abuse and neglect didn't typically welcome child enablers with open arms. As the courtroom emptied, Cody approached the prosecutor, a sharp woman named Elisa Dudley who'd handled the case with impressive thoroughness. Thank you, he said simply. Thank the evidence, she replied. This case had more documentation than most terrorism prosecutions. Someone did very thorough investigative work. Cody nodded. Someone indeed. Outside the courthouse, he found Dino waiting by their truck. The boy had grown 3 inches in 6 months and was learning to use his left arm normally again despite the scarring. The burns had healed, but they'd left permanent marks, a reminder that some wounds never completely disappeared. Is it over? Dino asked. The legal part is over, Cody said. Quinn's going to prison for the rest of his life. He'll never hurt anyone again. What about Mom? That was the hardest question. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that his stepmother had chosen a criminal over his safety? That she'd helped plan a bank robbery while letting him get tortured? Your mom made some very bad choices, Cody said carefully. She's going to prison too, but for a shorter time. When you're older, if you want to see her, we can talk about it. Dino considered this with the seriousness that trauma had forced on him too early. I don't think I want to see her. She knew he was hurting me, and she didn't stop him. The boy's insight was painful but accurate. Roseanne had chosen her lover over her stepson's safety, then compounded the betrayal by helping plan their escape funding. Some breaks in trust couldn't be repaired. As they drove home, to a new house on the other side of town, far from the crime scene their old home had become, Cody reflected on the completeness of his victory. Quinn would die in solitary confinement. Roseanne would spend her prime years in federal prison. Both would lose everything they tried to steal. But justice, Cody had learned, required more than legal consequences. That evening, he made 2 phone calls. The first was to a contact at ADX Florence, a guard who owed him favors from their time serving together in Iraq. The second was to a woman at FCI Dublin who understood that some debts followed people behind bars. Quinn and Roseanne had legal protection now. What they didn't have was the kind of protection that money couldn't buy and lawyers couldn't provide. The reckoning was nearly complete. Chapter 8. Permanent Solutions. 1 year after the sentencing, Cody received 2 pieces of news that confirmed his understanding of how justice actually worked in the real world. The first came via a brief phone call from ADX Florence. Quinn Krause had been found dead in his cell, apparently the victim of a heart attack brought on by stress and poor health. The official report noted that he'd been suffering from depression and had repeatedly complained of chest pains that medical staff attributed to anxiety. No autopsy would be performed. Budget constraints and the obvious cause of death made it unnecessary. What the report didn't mention was that Quinn had spent his final months in a state of constant terror. The isolation at ADX was designed to break the human spirit, but Quinn's particular torment had been more personal. Somehow, despite the facility's extreme security, he'd received regular messages from other inmates who knew exactly what he'd done to an 8-year-old boy. The messages weren't threats, they were promises. Detailed descriptions of what child abusers experienced in general population. Stories about previous cases where protective custody had failed. Reminders that even in Supermax, guards sometimes made mistakes. Quinn had requested transfer to another facility 17 times. Each request had been denied for administrative reasons that didn't quite make sense. He tried to commit suicide twice, but ADX was designed to prevent even that escape. Instead, he'd lived in constant fear until his body finally surrendered to the stress. The second piece of news came 3 days later from FCI Dublin. Roseanne Brewer had been killed during what the warden described as an altercation with another inmate over television programming. The other inmate, a woman serving time for killing her abusive ex-husband, claimed self-defense when Roseanne had attacked her with an improvised weapon. Security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned during the incident, and no other inmates had witnessed the altercation. The investigation concluded that Roseanne had been the aggressor, which meant no additional charges would be filed. She'd been buried in a pauper's grave since no family members had claimed the body. Cody read both reports while drinking coffee on his back porch, watching Dino practice batting in their new backyard. The boy was thriving, straight A's in school, nightmares decreasing in frequency, and absolutely no memory problems despite what the doctors had initially feared about trauma-induced cognitive issues. Emma, Roseanne's daughter, was doing equally well with her grandmother in Virginia. The old woman had been horrified to learn about her daughter's crimes and had immediately filed for full custody. The girl was young enough that the details had been kept from her. She knew only that her mother had made bad choices and wouldn't be coming home for a long time. "Dad," Dino called from the yard. "Can we go fishing this weekend?" "Absolutely," Cody replied. "Just you and me." That evening, Cody made one final phone call related to the case. Major Clayton answered on the first ring. "I heard Quinn Krause died of natural causes," Clayton said without preamble. Apparently, the stress of incarceration was too much for his system. "Tragic," Cody replied. "I also heard Roseanne got into a fight with the wrong woman." Prison can be dangerous for people who hurt children. Unfortunately, protective custody isn't always protective enough. They spoke for a few more minutes about Dino's progress in school and Cody's plans to retire from active duty next year. Neither man mentioned that favors had been called in, that debts accumulated over 20 years of military service had been spent to ensure permanent justice. Some conversations didn't need to be explicit. The next morning, Cody drove to Dino's school for a parent-teacher conference. Mrs. Lila English, his son's third-grade teacher, had requested a meeting to discuss Dino's remarkable improvement over the past year. "He's like a different child," she explained, showing Cody samples of Dino's artwork and writing assignments. "The trauma counseling has helped enormously, but I think what's made the biggest difference is his sense of security. He knows he's safe now." Safe. It was a simple word that encompassed everything Cody had fought for over the past 18 months. His son was safe because the people who'd threatened him were permanently removed from the equation. Not transferred, not paroled, not given second chances to hurt other children. Removed. "He talks about you constantly," Mrs. English continued. "How you're a soldier who protects people, how you came home to save him. You're his hero." Cody felt an emotion he'd almost forgotten existed: pride without reservation. For 20 years, he'd served his country by killing enemies in foreign lands. But this mission, protecting his son from domestic predators, felt like the most important service he'd ever performed. That afternoon, he picked Dino up from school and drove to their favorite ice cream shop. As they sat sharing a sundae, his son asked the question that Cody had been expecting for months. "Dad, what happened to Quinn and Mom?" Cody had prepared for this conversation, consulting with child psychologists about how much truth an 8-year-old could handle. The answer was surprisingly simple: enough truth to understand that justice had been served, but not so much that he'd feel responsible for their fates. "They both died in prison," Cody said gently. "Quinn got sick from stress, and your mom got into a fight with another prisoner. They can't hurt anyone anymore." Dino considered this while carefully eating around the cherry on top of their sundae. "Are you sad about Mom?" "I'm sad about the person I thought she was," Cody answered honestly. "But I'm not sad that she can't make bad choices anymore." "Me neither," Dino said with the brutal honesty of childhood. "She knew he was hurting me, and she didn't stop him. That's not what moms are supposed to do." No, Cody thought it definitely wasn't. As they finished their ice cream and headed home, Cody reflected on the completeness of his mission. Quinn Krause and Roseanne Brewer were dead, their deaths officially ruled as unrelated incidents that had nothing to do with the husband and father they'd betrayed. The evidence trail led nowhere. The favors had been repaid, and the debts had been settled. Most importantly, Dino was safe, thriving, and learning that some people in the world could be trusted to keep their promises about protection. The war was over. His family had won. Chapter 9: New Beginnings. 2 years after the bank robbery, Cody stood in the kitchen of their new house, making pancakes while Dino set the table for breakfast. Sunlight streamed through windows that looked out on a garden they'd planted together: tomatoes, peppers, and a small herb section that the boy tended with religious devotion. The house was everything their old home hadn't been: secure, peaceful, and completely free of haunted memories. Cody had chosen the location carefully: a quiet neighborhood with excellent schools, where his reputation as a decorated veteran made him a respected neighbor rather than a curiosity. "Dad, Coach Blake wants to know if you can help with baseball practice next week," Dino said, pouring orange juice with the careful concentration of a 10-year-old trying not to spill. "I'll be there," Cody promised. "What position are you playing now?" "Pitcher. Coach says I have good control." Control. It was a word that had different meanings in their house than in most families. For Dino, it meant mastering his curveball and learning to place the ball exactly where he wanted it. For Cody, it meant ensuring that his son grew up understanding that some people could be trusted completely while others revealed their true nature only under pressure. The boy had processed his trauma with the resilience of youth, aided by excellent counseling and the absolute security of knowing his father would never let anyone hurt him again. He still bore the scars on his arm, QK burned into his flesh, but they'd become something different over time. Not a mark of victimization, but proof that he'd survived and overcome. Cody's phone buzzed with a text from Major Clayton: "Package pickup at 1,400 hours. Standard protocols." The message was code for their monthly check-in at a safe house near Fort Bragg. Since retiring from active duty, Cody had transitioned into private contract work, the kind of missions that required a particular skill set, but couldn't be officially acknowledged by any government agency. The work was lucrative and satisfying in ways that conventional employment couldn't match. When corporate executives needed problems solved permanently, when foreign assets required protection that couldn't be provided through official channels, when justice required services that courts couldn't deliver, they called Cody strong. His reputation in those circles was built on 2 principles: absolute discretion and permanent solutions. The clients who hired him weren't interested in rehabilitation or second chances. They wanted problems erased completely and professionally. "Will you be home for dinner?" Dino asked, interrupting his thoughts. "Always," Cody replied. "We have a rule about that, remember? Family dinner every night unless you're saving the world." And am I saving the world today? Dino considered this with mock seriousness. "Probably. You usually are." At 2 p.m., Cody arrived at the safe house to find Clayton waiting with a new dossier. The target was a human trafficking coordinator who'd been moving children through military bases using forged dependent IDs. 3 previous attempts to prosecute him had failed due to evidence mysteriously disappearing and witnesses recanting their testimony. He's got protection at federal level, Clayton explained. Someone with enough influence to make cases disappear. Local law enforcement is frustrated, FBI is handcuffed by politics, and meanwhile kids keep disappearing. Cody studied the photographs and background information with professional interest. The target, Reynaldo Beard, operated from a compound in South Carolina that was technically a religious retreat but functioned as a processing center for trafficked children. His network included corrupt officials, compromised social workers, and enough legitimate religious cover to deflect casual investigation. How many kids? Cody asked. Unknown. Conservative estimate based on disappearances and witness reports. At least 40 over the past 3 years. 40 children. Some of them probably Dino's age when the trafficking started. Timeline. Client wants this resolved before his operation expands into North Carolina. Apparently, Beard has been scouting locations near military bases here. The mission was exactly the kind of work Cody had specialized in during his contract career. High-value target, significant collateral benefit, and the kind of justice that courts couldn't deliver due to systemic corruption. Fee, $2 million, plus expenses and cleanup. Cody closed the dossier. I'll need 2 weeks for reconnaissance and planning. The client was hoping for something faster. The client can hope for a lot of things. Professional work takes professional timelines. That evening, over dinner at their kitchen table, Dino told him about a new kid at school, a quiet boy named Xavier who'd been placed with a foster family after his parents had abandoned him. The other kids were being mean because Xavier was behind in his studies and wore clothes that didn't fit properly. I told him he could sit with us at lunch, Dino said. Is that okay? Of course it's okay. What else did you do? I gave him half my sandwich because he didn't have much food, and I asked Mrs. English if she had any extra supplies for kids who need them. Cody felt that familiar surge of pride. His son was developing into exactly the kind of person who deserved protection from predators like Reynaldo Beard. You did the right thing, he said. Taking care of people who can't protect themselves is important work. Like what you do. Exactly like what I do. Later that night, after Dino was asleep, Cody sat on their back porch planning his approach to the South Carolina mission. The target was well protected and politically connected, but he'd also made the fatal mistake of expanding his operation into Cody's operational area. Some people never learned that there were men in the world who treated child predators as legitimate targets of war. Reynaldo Beard was about to receive an education in the difference between federal protection and professional elimination. As Cody studied satellite photos of the compound and began calculating approach routes, he reflected on how perfectly his life had arranged itself. During the day, he was a devoted father who coached Little League and attended school plays. At night, he eliminated threats to children who didn't have fathers capable of protecting them. Quinn Krause and Roseanne Brewer had been personal, justice for his own family's betrayal. But Reynaldo Beard represented something larger. Proof that some people forfeited their right to exist when they chose to prey on children. The mission would begin tomorrow with reconnaissance flights and electronic surveillance. Within 2 weeks, 40 missing children would be avenged, and one trafficking network would be permanently dismantled. Cody Strong had found his purpose in life, protecting children who couldn't protect themselves and eliminating predators who thought they were beyond the reach of justice. It was the kind of work that let him sleep peacefully every night, knowing that his son lived in a world where some evils met permanent endings. The war continued, but now he was fighting for the right side on the battlefield that mattered most. Epilogue. 5 years later, Dino Strong graduated as valedictorian of his 8th grade class and announced his intention to follow his father's path into military service. The scars on his arm had faded to thin white lines that he wore like badges of honor, proof that he'd survived and overcome. Cody watched from the audience, wearing civilian clothes, but maintaining the bearing of a man who dedicated his life to to protecting innocents from evil. In the past 5 years, his contract work had eliminated 17 high-value targets involved in child trafficking, domestic terrorism, and other crimes that official channels couldn't address. Each mission had been planned with the same precision he'd once brought to military operations, executed with the same professional competence, and concluded with the same permanent results. His reputation in certain circles was legendary. When conventional justice failed, when courts were compromised, when the system couldn't protect its most vulnerable citizens, Cody Strong could be trusted to provide permanent solutions. The work had made him wealthy, but more importantly, it had given him purpose beyond simple revenge. Quinn Krause and Roseanne Brewer had been the beginning, not the end. They'd taught him that some people forfeited their right to exist when they chose to prey on children. As Dino accepted his graduation diploma and looked toward the audience with pride that needed no words, Cody knew that his son understood the most important lesson of their shared trauma. The world contained evil people who would hurt children if given the opportunity, but also contained good people who would eliminate those predators permanently if necessary. Some lessons were worth any price to teach. Some justice was worth any risk to deliver. And some fathers would cross any line to ensure their children grew up in a world where monsters faced permanent consequences for their choices. The war between protectors and predators was eternal, but Cody Strong had chosen his side long ago. He would never forgive. He would never forget. And he would never stop hunting. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.